Good evening, everybody. God, you sound so depressed. Okay. See what we can do about that. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I know that taking the time out to go listen to a lecture on depression has great potential to be depressing. I'm hoping that that won't be the case. My intention is to speak for roughly an hour or so and share with you some of the current information that's available about various treatment options. This is a very dynamic field. Things keep changing. And the things that people know that turn out to not be so are almost legendary. Things keep changing. And so it's really my job as a clinician, as a researcher, as an author, to stay current with the literature and help co-create the literature as we learn more and more about what actually works in treatment and what people assume that turns out to not necessarily be true, and some of the things that people really haven't paid attention to that turn out to be very significant factors. So when I wrap this up in roughly 60 minutes, give or take, I want to leave time following that to be able to address questions. You obviously came here for a reason tonight, and sometimes people are here just out of a professional curiosity, clinicians in the group. Some of you are here because you yourself are dealing with issues of depression. Others of you are dealing with people that you love, people that you care about that are suffering and you don't really know what to do about it, and you're looking for ideas. So I'm hoping to be able to address all of these various interests and concerns, but I'll open it up to questions, and obviously I can't comment about your specific issues. So when you ask questions, they need to be of a more general nature. You know, people often, people will raise their hands and ask questions like, so do you think I should get off Prozac now? And it's like, obviously I can't render an opinion about that in your particular case, so please don't ask. The idea, of course, is to talk about treatment options. That when we look at the phenomenon of depression, it is a very complex phenomenon, a multidimensional phenomenon. And what's really in some ways very frustrating to me is how readily people will focus on one aspect of it and miss the larger essence of what's going on with it. I hope to be able to give you multiple perspectives. The first thing that you should know is here is a disorder, unlike many disorders that the mental health profession really doesn't know what to do much about. Depression has gone from being one of the least understood problems to one of the best understood problems. When I started studying depression more than 30 years ago, there was really very little that was known about it. It was assumed to be a biological disorder that just some unfortunate people were afflicted with. We didn't know anything about risk factors for depression beyond gender and family history. Now we know, of course, there are scores and scores of risk factors. And by a risk factor, I mean any variable, any factor that increases the probability of developing a particular condition. So in the same way that I can say somebody who smokes cigarettes is at an elevated risk for cardiopulmonary disease, I can say that somebody who has this particular cognitive style, this particular relationship style, this particular coping style is at an elevated risk for depression. And here's the first thing to appreciate. Depression doesn't strike out of the blue. By the time somebody begins to suffer the signs and symptoms of depression, the risk factors had already been in place for years. But what is interesting is how somebody goes through an episode in their life. Their boyfriend leaves them, their wife leaves them, they lose their job, they are in an accident, something bad happens, and then depression hits, and the temptation is to say it's the bad event that caused the depression. But part of what has been unique about my focus in the field and the various books that I write and why I get invited around the world to teach is because what I have been interested in all of these years is interviewing people who have been through some pretty bad experiences, people who have been through some of the worst things that you can possibly imagine. I mean, people who have been raped, tortured, mutilated, people who have left their homelands literally with the bullets whizzing past them, people who have lost everything they've spent a lifetime working for when their house burns down or washes away in a flood, people who have lost their entire family in a car crash or a plane crash, people who have been through the worst experiences imaginable. And when I'm sitting across from someone who has been through something terrible, and this person is depressed, it's really easy to understand it. It's really easy to empathize with it, sympathize with it. But what has interested me all these years is when I'm sitting across from someone who has been to hell and back, somebody who probably should be depressed, who isn't. And that's what leads to the questions then, what is it about the way this person is thinking? What is it about the way this person is coping? What is it that serves to insulate this person against depression? Now think about the language I'm using right now. What are the factors that insulate someone against depression? What I'm going to be emphasizing all through this talk is part of what we have learned about risk factors is this, that the people who most readily succumb to depression are missing some very specific skills that other people seem to intuitively have. So that when I see somebody who's been hurt in some terrible thing that's gone on, and this person bounces back, shows resilience, and you ask this person, how is it that you faced this adversity and bounced back? They can't tell you. They give you these really insightful answers like, I guess I must just have good genes. And they can't really point to what it is that's actually helping them. That's my job. That's the job of other clinicians and researchers trying to figure out what are these factors that serve to increase or decrease vulnerability to depression. So let's go through what some of the things are that we've learned. First thing to know is when I say that things have changed markedly, when I say depression's gone from being one of the least understood to one of the best understood problems that we as clinicians are asked to treat, the treatment success rate for depression is quite high. There's a lot that we know how to do in helping people overcome depression. But there are some problems. The number one problem is most of the people who suffer depression never ask for help. They suffer silently. They sit around and make bad decisions that make their depression worse. The fact that you actually came out tonight and are willing to proactively seek information and hopefully apply it speaks very, very well for you. But most of the people who suffer depression don't do that. They suffer silently, sitting in a darkened bedroom, talking about how unfair life is and how rotten life is. So treatment works, but it's also true that not all treatment works equally well. Not everybody responds to each of the treatments that work, and that's part of the being an educated individual. How can you be someone who is able to choose intelligently how you go about seeking treatment for yourself? So here is my agenda for this evening. I'm first going to talk a little bit about what do we know about depression. Then I'm going to talk about the various treatment options. Antidepressant medications are the most common form of treatment these days. Is that a good thing? Not really, for reasons that I'll talk about. I'm going to talk about psychotherapy. What is it that sitting around having a conversation with somebody can do? And in actuality, it can do a lot. What about self-help? I can say flatly, no one can fix you without your cooperation, without your participation. Learning the kinds of skills that I'm talking about learning that are known to reduce depression and even prevent depression